Hello and welcome to Mary Live. This is Dr. Mark Miravalle. My friends, on this day, we're going to date this program, September 8th, 2021, we celebrate the great feast of the birth of Our Lady. And I believe that on this particular feast, we're called to A, greatly celebrate, and B, to do an ecclesial examination of conscience. And the A should be clear. The birth of Mary, continuing with the graces of the Immaculate Conception, of course, which really starts salvation history, continues it in a powerful way. Now, the mother is born from whom the Redeemer will come. And there is great reason to celebrate that Our Lady brings us the Redeemer, but also who Our Lady is herself and the fact that she is our mother. At the same time, I believe it is very important that we take an honest examination of where we are as a church and as a world. And that's why I believe this to be one of the most important Mary Lives I've ever presented to you. And I pray you would receive it in that mode as well. Because along with the celebration, we have to realize that the church on September 8th, 2021 is in the state of very significant historical crisis. We are in crisis. One author defined crisis for the church as whenever the church becomes secularized, where it's listening to the voice of the world instead of the voice of Jesus in terms of the faithful and in some cases even leadership, not looking to Him first and also to Our Lady as a means of remedy. And I think that's an important examination we have to do right now. We are in crisis. The church is in crisis. We are in a crisis of faith. Statistics, which you have to be a little careful of, but I think these are indicating some realities here, are saying that Catholics in the West are somewhere around 50% in a belief of the real presence. Well, even if that's exaggerated, it's still a frightening idea that any Catholic would not believe in the real presence. We're certainly in a crisis of family, in terms of family breakup, in terms of divorce, in terms of just premarital relations, in terms of not even worrying about getting married anymore. We're certainly in a crisis of life, and the attack on our unborn brothers and sisters, even spearheaded in several tragic cases by people who refer to themselves as Catholic. So ultimately, we're also talking about a global crisis of conscience where the world, particularly the West, but not exclusively, has lost the basic premise of natural law. That is to do good and avoid evil. We don't even agree on a basic understanding of natural law and of right and wrong. Well, that's a crisis. In a certain sense, the church is to deal with the global scene because the church is supposed to be the sacrament of Christ, the institution of Christ, the mystical body that sanctifies the world. And if the church is in crisis, you can be sure that the world will be in crisis. What do we do? How do we respond to this crisis? Well, I believe not in a pious way, but in a metaphysical, ontological, supernatural way, we really do have the answer. And I'm going to go to a anointed and prophetic speech that was given on May 7th of 2005 in the sanctuary of Fatima. And in the sanctuary of Fatima between May 3rd and May 7th of 2005, there were 7 cardinals, there were some 20 plus bishops, there were theologians from countries throughout the world and renowned theologians, all gathered in Fatima to discuss this issue. What is the remedy to the crisis? And of course, if we were in crisis in 2005, we were certainly in greater crisis, both with the church and both with the world, now on September 8th, 2021. A presentation was given by a Father Peter Damien Fellner, who, in my opinion, was one of the greatest living Mariologists of his time. And in the heart of Fatima, at the sanctuary, surrounded by cardinals and bishops, who were all gathered, by the way, to support a votum, a petition to our Holy Father. At this time, it would have been Pope Benedict the 16th, for a solemn proclamation of Our Lady as the spiritual mother of all peoples, co-redemptrix, mediatrix, advocate. In that context, Father Peter Damien Fellner gave what I think it was really an anointed answer of what do we do with the crisis. And Father Peter put it in the context of, first of all, Genesis 3:15, that we are in an ongoing spiritual, cosmic battle between God's greatest creature, Our Lady, who he commonly calls the Immaculate Co-Redemptrix and Mediatrix of all graces, and the adversary, the serpent, Satan, and his seeds of evil and death. So this is the context, this is the historical framework in which we should view as Christians everything that's taken place within human history. It's an ongoing battle. But Father Peter Damien would direct us especially to Revelations 12:17. And I can't tell you how powerful this was, hearing this in Fatima at the very place where Our Lady gave remedy to this dimension. But Father Peter focused on Revelations 12, in particular verse 17. I want to read to you what he said from that, in my mind, historic presentation. Because ultimately, my friends, it's all about us. It's all about us in terms of how much we respond to the woman or how much we are further deceived by Satan, now the serpent dragon, in Revelations 12. He says, and I quote, "Satan has a certain sophisticated cleverness, enabling him to excel in the seduction of man and so take charge of this world, but has neither the courage nor the means to confront directly the invincible woman, the mother of the truth that will set you free. The dragon can only attack the woman to the extent that he can persuade her children. Then the rest are the brethren of her firstborn," Revelations 12:17, "that she is not the Mater et Magista Veritatis," that she's not the mother and teacher of truth. And as he would say 12 or 13 times, that she's not the Immaculate Co-Redemptrix, that she's not our advocate, that we shouldn't focus on her cause. And he goes on, so her cause, Satan's goal to convince us, so her cause would be seen as, quote, as a irrelevant, the Marian cause, the message of Fatima, but also the full truth about Our Lady is either A, irrelevant, or B, as he says, downright counterproductive. Respectfully, the position of those indignantly indifferent to it, that is Our Lady's cause, or violently opposed to it. Now, this is gold, my friends, in terms of insight. That Satan does not have more power than the mother. And we're going to see that as Father Peter continues with what happens at Fatima on October 13th, 1917. But he can't convince us that the woman is irrelevant or even counterproductive. If that sounds like, well, who would consider that? I'm sorry to say, there are many in the church today that would classify Our Lady as either irrelevant or absolutely counterproductive. And a quick comment on those. Irrelevant in the sense that, and one friend uses the expression, Our Lady of the statue. In other words, she's fine if she's over there on a statue in the corner. Occasionally we can pray to her. It's kind of a nice pious, icing on the cake, but there's no real power in her. If we're going to fix things, we have to fix things ourselves. Okay? Well, that's kind of that she's irrelevant to the real crisis of today. Sadly, many people in the church, and sadly, many members of leadership of the church, see Our Lady not as the remedy, not as the powerful co-redemptrix and mediatrix of all graces who can solve the crisis of today, but rather as something nice and kind of small-t traditional, but we've got to tend to the situation kind of on our own. The other category Father Peter brings up is absolutely counterproductive. And unfortunately, this has been the ongoing treatment of Our Lady in most, not all, most cases of ecumenical efforts and dialogue. It was even said by a major ecclesiologist at the Second Vatican Council that if Mary interferes in any way with the ecumenical mission of the church, she simply should not be mentioned. And Father Fellner, in this prophetic talk, will say, St. Bernard of Clairvaux said, De Maria nunquam satis, about Mary never enough, understanding that she is the remedy. But today, many in the church, especially those, not exclusively and not, without exception by any means, but many in the church are saying, De Maria nunquam, that is, about Mary, never. Just don't bring her up if she's a problem. And so Father Fellner has put his finger on two real possibilities that come from the false deception, the lies of the deceiver. Now, he goes on to say, and just bear with me with this last quote from Father Peter Damien, if to the contrary, Mary's children are convinced that she is just this, the preeminent member of the church, and again repeated throughout this, the immaculate co-redemptrix and mediatrix of all graces, the advocate that we need. The dragon's anti-cause is finished. For other than sensational bluff, the dragon has no other effective means of blocking her. But these, so long as she makes our cause hers. The last great miracle of the Son, here at Fatima, 13th October 1917, should be more than enough to prove beyond argument, number one, the real control of the forces of nature is in the hands of the heavenly woman, the Immaculate Virgin, the Queen of Angels, with Michael commanding the hosts of heaven in her service. And two, that the actual powers of the common enemy, Satan, of her and of us, do not extend beyond the theatrical, or perhaps not even the melodramatic, of producing a great deal of noise, of smoke, of unpleasantness, effective only as a means to convince us that we ought to accept his philosophy of life, the one peddled to our first parents, and in every seduction to sin, especially against chastity and humility. Mary is indeed the strong woman. And so here, again, in an anointed presentation, Father Fellner is saying Satan is going to use the same tactics he uses on Adam and Eve on us to try to get us to think that, again, in this case, in our reality, not the tree of good and evil, which is what Adam and Eve had, but still that it's up to us, and that the woman is really irrelevant to the crisis in the church today. It's rather remarkable how it's in the areas of humility and chastity that Satan attacks the rest of her offspring. So, but Satan doesn't have the power. The miracle of the Son shows Our Lady has the power. Remember what Genesis 3:15 says. She will crush your head. This is God the Father. She will crush your head. You will lie in wait for her heel. Does that sound like a victory for Satan? We have a promise from Our Lady that we will be victorious if we make her cause our cause. If we accept in full heart and mind what she says to us at Fatima and throughout the Marian apparitions throughout the world. And by the way, this is not just based on private revelation. This is just confirming what is the truth of the church. What is the experience of the church? What is the history of the church? That in time of need, in time of crisis, which we have now, we've got to turn full bore to the mother as the first priority. Why first? Because Jesus has manifested her as the first priority. And she has come down at places like Fatima and says, God wishes to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. What's the context? The vision of hell. People are going to hell. And Our Lady is God's remedy. And so we see this through history. Go back to the 3rd century. In the 3rd century, during the time of Roman persecution, the early Christians prayed the Sub Tuum Praesidium. We fly to your patronage, O Holy Mother of God. Despise not our petitions and our necessities, but deliver us from all dangers, O ever glorious and blessed Virgin. That's a 3rd century prayer to Our Lady, because they turned to her as the priority during the time of the persecutions. And by the way, don't for a moment entertain this competition stuff between Jesus and Mary. That's another lie from Satan. The mother does it because the Son has directed her to do it. She's in total obedience, in total unity of will. She was on earth. You think that's going to change in heaven? So it's the Marian remedy because Jesus wants it to be. Because Jesus, in his fairness, allows creature versus creature in freedom. And that's what's taking place. So the 3rd century, it's a Sub Tuum. In the 12th century, when you have a near collapse of the church based on clerical scandal and bishops seeking to be landowners rather than shepherds, what happens? Our Lady inspires 2 great men. St. Francis with a new call to rebuild the church, which comes directly from Jesus, but the Franciscan charism is quintessentially Marian. And Francis would carry this on with Bonaventure, that Our Lady is the remedy, as Bonaventure would say so many times within that early beginnings of the Franciscans. And St. Dominic with the Rosary. And the combination of the Franciscans and the Dominicans led to what would become the 13th century, one of the greatest renewals of the church's history. Go to the 16th century, the Protestant revolt. It was a revolt because Reformation means you stay in and you do the tough work from the inside to purify. There was plenty of need for purification, but breaking off is not a true reformation. It's a revolt. Well, how does Our Lady respond to that? And by the way, the heart of the revolt is rejecting Our Lady's mediation and also the church's mediation, rejecting the papacy, rejecting the church and its protection from error by the power of the Spirit. How does Our Lady respond? Our Lady of Guadalupe, where we get 8 million Catholics after we lose 5 million to the Protestant revolt in Western Europe, and the Rosary Battle of Lepanto, where Our Lady protects Western Christendom from a Muslim Turk invasion. And it goes on and on and on. Even in the 19th century, where secular and specifically Masonic forces chased Pius IX out of the Vatican, it was the definition of the Immaculate Conception and the graces that would come with that would restore both papacy and a great renewal in the church. History shows that Our Lady is the remedy during times of difficulty. And again, Father Peter Damian Fellner says, we've got to move away from the idea of a solemn definition as just kind of an ivory tower theological thing to a concrete release of supernatural power. And that's why you see when a Holy Father proclaims that Our Lady is the Immaculate Co-Redemptrix, that she is the Mediatrix of all graces and advocate, she's our spiritual mother in all of those ways. When he does that, he's showing the humility of saying, we can't fix our situation on our own. We desperately need right now, my friends, that humility. We can't fix it on our own. We need the mother. She must be the first priority because it's Jesus who sends Mary down at Fatima, for example, but it's also Jesus that gives us Mary from Calvary. Behold your mother. My friends, for the love of God and his mother and for the renewal of the church, let's obey the command of Jesus from Calvary. Let's behold her now. And practically speaking, that means we can't put inner dialogue as the first remedy. I'm not speaking against the benefits of dialogue. I'm saying we are not going to fix the crisis ourselves. We've got to go to her. So as well as dialogue is, it's not going to be the supernatural remedy for a grave historic crisis that we're experiencing now. The same thing as well, and I say this sensitively, and please understand the distinctions here, also with ecumenism. Ecumenism is a key priority for the church, and it should be, because the heart of Jesus suffers while we're not united. It can never be the first priority. Ecumenism is not going to solve the crisis. And especially forms of false ecumenism, what John Paul II called pseudo-ecumenism, which led to, again, putting Mary off to the side, seeing Mary as the problem instead of the remedy. That's also a lie from the adversary, that Our Lady is the problem. He wants us to believe that because if he can even paralyze, if he can bring to a stop the movement to proclaim Our Lady as the spiritual mother of all peoples, as the Immaculate Co-Redemptrix and Mediatrix, and the formulation can be however ultimately the Holy Father wants, as long as it is Mary's relationship with us and those roles of Co-Redemptrix, Mediatrix, and Advocate. That's between God, Our Lady, and the Holy Father. If the adversary can stop that, put it on pause, he's already won. He's at least delayed what ultimately will be Our Lady's victory. How do we know? Because she promised us at Fatima, in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph and a period of peace will be given to the world. So, what can we do starting on this September 8th, 2021? And what in this inspired presentation of Father Peter Damian Fellner back on May 7th of 2005, what concretely do we do? Number one, we pray for our church leaders. And when I say this, my friends, we cannot at this point underestimate the power of prayer. We can't enter that type of Pelagianism, which is, it's for us to fix the problems of the church. It's for us to do Christian unity. There's also ecumenical Pelagianism where we think we can unite Christians. I think 40 years of ecumenical activity show that that's not going to happen. It's going to be the mother that unites Christians, not we based on new theological insights. But we've got to pray and understanding the power of prayer and the power of these beads, that the leadership of the church will see Our Lady as the first priority given us by God as remedy. And that will show two concrete forms. Number one, the solemn definition of her role as the Immaculate Co-Redemptrix and Mediatrix. The Mediatrix of all grace is the advocate for the people of God, that she's ultimately our spiritual mother that suffers for us, nourishes us, and protects us. That's Co-Redemptrix, Mediatrix, and Advocate. Secondly, that we continue the mission of Marian consecration, that we are personally giving ourselves to the mother. And in this way, to use a Maximilian point, and Father Fellner was certainly a spiritual son and theological son of St. Maximilian, that we can Marianize the church right now. Because right now, Our Lady is not in a predominant position, and that's the way heaven wants her, as is manifest even not only in the church's teaching and Lumen Gentium's teaching that she's supposed to be the preeminent member of the church, and she's in fact mother of the church, not a side thought, but also private revelation will confirm that, not sustain it, but confirm it. So we must continue the campaign of Marian consecration. Thirdly, and I say this to you, my brother and sister, be influential for the dogma. be influential in whatever way you can. Some of you have already sent petitions to the Holy Father. Encourage those around you that understand the Marian signs of the times to do the same thing. You can also send another petition. You're not limited to one petition. Pope Francis, Vatican City State 00120. That's the address. You put your stamps on. Let the Holy Father know that you have Our Lady as your priority for the crisis in the church today. Let him know that that is the awareness of the faithful. So send the Holy Father a petition and encourage other people to do the same. Don't worry about the big picture strategy. You know, there's nothing more disastrous in a battle when all the soldiers play general. Let's not do that with Our Lady. She's the general. Let's just follow what she's asked us to do. And let's follow what's the tradition of the church. Send a petition to the Holy Father asking him to proclaim the dogma of Mary as the spiritual mother of all peoples. Continue to pray for, again, the leadership of the church, and that's a very important specific, that they will get this. I have to say honestly, the faithful, where the faith is thriving, I get this. It takes so little explanation. Oftentimes, you can almost barely get it out of your mouth, and they say, oh, well, of course she's the co-redemptrix and mediatrix of all grace. Why is this not already defined? Some will say, well, I thought that was already defined. Okay. And I want to bring up 3 examples that have just come to my attention in the last week of lay people being influential in trying to fight for this dogma upon which our peace is dependent. One is a woman named Joyce from Europe who called and said, every first Friday of the month, she and a friend do all-night adoration for the dogma. All-night adoration. I thought, that is being influential. A second individual, again, this is all just in the last week, a second individual, I was on a plane flying from Ave Maria up to Franciscan University, where I teach at both places, and a gentleman was reading a book on Divine Mercy, and I said, you like the book? And I put down my Mass for a moment, and he said, oh, you're Miravalle. I look at all the Mary Lives. Because of Mary Live, I have started a rosary group of 50 to 60 people where we pray for the fifth Marian dogma. I thought, how beautiful. And then thirdly, this just happened yesterday, I noticed a student in one of my classes on her water bottle had this little expression. I'll bring it up close. Co-redemptrix, mediatrix, and advocate. I said, where'd you get that? She said, oh, I made it. And I pass them around. And I thought, how beautiful. Now, that's being influential. So I conclude this talk, which I think is I pray that you understand how important our seeing Our Lady as the cause, as the victory, because Jesus has made her such. I ask you to be influential. Pray to the Mother. Ask her what you can do, because we can all do something. And of course, petitioning the Holy Father, praying the prayer of the Lady of all Nations, which I think is the most powerful single prayer after the Mass and Rosary for this definition. Ask Our Lady what you can do, because you've got untold talents, and you can do something as well to help others understand why this is so important. It might be just talking to your parish priest, and he might say, well, I'm not interested in that. But you know what? By you bringing it up to your parish priest, you have allowed him to take the first step in understanding that this is the teachings of the church. Mary, co-redemptrix, mediatrix, and advocate is the doctrine of the church. And perhaps it'll get him pondering. Be influential. Let's do that together as a gift for Our Lady. This on the feast of her birth, that we may do our parts to bring that crown ever closer to the Immaculate Head of Our Lady, that our Holy Father, that leadership will respond to heaven's remedy for the crisis, because we are promised victory. Don't listen to the hisses of Satan. We will win, because she will win. Her Immaculate Heart will triumph, and we will get peace. Thanks so much for being with us for this Mary Live. This is Dr. Mark Miravalle saying God bless you all, and blessed feast of the birth of Our Lady.